Ahojte moji milí štvrtáci, pozdravujem vás po veľkonočných sviatkoch. Dúfam, že ste si trošku oddychli, no a môžeme ďalej pracovať aj s dejepisom. OK, pár vecí. Dúfam, že som stihol vám opraviť počas sviatkov všetky vaše zadania. No a s hodnotením ste spokojní. Tí, čo ste poslali neskôr alebo ste s hodnotím nespokojní, tak sa mi môžete samozrejme ozvať, ako som vám písal. A môžete sa mi ozvať a pridelím vám referáty. Tie referáty vám pridelujem podľa toho, ako sa profilujete. Nemusíte sa báť, že to bude čisto len dejepis, ak nie ste na ten dejepis zameraní. Pridelil som nejakých 5 referátov z dejín astrofyziky napríklad, takže máte takéto možnosti. Dobre, dôležitá vec, na ktorej prosím, keď pracujete pri zadaní, na ktorom dúfam, že robíte priebežne, lebo veľmi si tak zľahčíte prácu potom hlavne náraz znovu a neriskujete ako niektorí z vás, že ste odflakli 2-3 cvičenia a z každého rožku trošku a plus ešte zdroje, tak vám to zrazu skočilo na veľmi zlú známku. Nezabudnite prosím priebežne, môžete samozrejme tie zdroje si ukladať aj vo Worde a ten zoznam prameňov, použité literatúry môžete poslať ako prílohu Wordovú, okrem tých obrázkov, ktoré budete mať odfotené tie vaše práce. No čo je však dôležité, prosím vás, aj zdroje musíte písať tak, ako som vám pri tomto Mackovi hovoril, čiže má byť autor. Ja som dal na schvál, že meme, lebo tam nebol autor uvedený, takže môžete dať, že autor neznámy, malo by to byť capital letters, čiže veľkými písmenami. No a potom kurzívou máte názov článku, dátum niekedy bol napísaný ten článok, ale kedy ste ho použili, pretože na internete samozrejme všetko dá upravovať aj neskôr a spätne, takže dôležité je dátum, kedy ste to použili. Na Wikipedii napríklad, máte takýto zoznam úprava, podľa toho viete, kedy nejakú informáciu ste prebrali a napríklad sa zmenila, už nebola aktuálna, alebo ju niekto jednoducho nejakým spôsobom upravil. Dobre, potom až dáte available at a dáte konkrétny link na to. Dobre? Čiže takto som to aj hodil. OK, today, sorry for that. Today we'll continue with the topic we have, and that's the Cold War. For you, Cold War is actually to generate a couple of maps in here. A couple of maps. So you probably didn't have this one with Albania because of my face in right corner. Okay, that's much better, I believe. So you have a couple of maps where to depict some of the things, also some Venn diagram. We'll come to that point soon. And especially to watch a lot of videos about it. So that's why, for that reason, it's really difficult to give you general idea of like some development evolution of the Cold War, because it was not a single action, it was not single event, it was plenty of things that were happening for all this period, and actually some of them have been happening so far. So that means that probably it will be good to pick up only some basic terms and explain some basic things and events that were happening in here. So this is what we are going to do. I have no idea how far we can go with this, and for that reason, let's start. So Cold War. Why is it called the Cold War? First thing, it was not war at all. It was not war between Soviet Union and USA, between Nato and Warsaw Pact. They never clashed each other. And actually, Warsaw Pact deployed only one single action, and that was occupation of their ally of Czechoslovakia. So in this way, historians or people or journalists of those times start to call it that it was actually a war. It was a war that was not war at all, but it was kind of like cold relationship and cold behavior and international relations in this case. And everything what can be done apart from attacking each other. So what happened that they didn't clash like before? Main thing was this one, where nuclear weapons, A-bombs used in August 1945, dropped by U.S. Air Force on Japan, it caused that this missile gap was suddenly USA were the most powerful. But in 1949, Soviets finally managed to construct it too, and because there was obvious hostility, animosity between these two countries and their blocs, so they start to build them like dozens of thousands of missiles, čiže strely, jadrové strely. And this presence of weapons of mass destruction actually prevented superpowers from direct combat. The reason was that they were claiming that if there is like first attack, first missile attack, first strike, so probably the second strike would be like revenge, and from one or the other side, and probably that would point at launching like thousands of missiles on major cities in both countries, and probably cause that's of not of dozens of thousands like in Japan, but of millions, dozens of millions of people. Imagine like A-bombs dropping on New York or Moscow. So that would be incredible. From that, the reason and how this cartoon depicts, they couldn't use them. So in this way, you see a hydrogenium bomb that is much higher level, even more destructive than atomic nuclear weapon, Z bomb and Y rockets and so on. But still, armies are fighting and launching arrows. So this is symbolically that they couldn't use them because usage of one single A-bomb probably caused revenge, counter-strike, and probably destruction of most of civilization, and all the sci-fi about apocalyptic future. So that would seem like really true. And if you ask people about this topic, of 1962, for example, Cuban crisis. So ask them, and this is the thing that people who served in the military of those times, like now grannies, grandpas, so they were prepared for war for like 2 weeks. All the time, so still like mean they couldn't like change their clothes and so on, and preparing to fight and occupy Western Europe after the nuclear catastrophe. So that was actually something that called it like the Cold War. Still, the period was not like this, and that's why it was more like cold relationship, something that you don't like, you really hate, but you have to tolerate that guy in your presence, So that was something similar. From the things we already mentioned, so there were a couple of things interesting and important. And the beginning started with the employment of the Marshall Plan. John Marshall was the Minister of Treasury of USA, which means the Minister of Finances. God save us from Igor's decision, so we'll see what is going to happen. But John Marshall had a plan that how to restore Europe, and after the Second World War, and they said it probably even more in political conditions, political terms, and political restrictions, it's much better to create like open business, open trade among the countries. And that for that reason, it was inevitable for Americans to help Europe to rebuild their economy as soon as possible, so they could start production again, people could start earning money, and they could also buy American products. That was also one of the things. Actually, USA, including Canada and a couple of other countries, Australia and so on, so they were offered like kind of loans, a couple of loans that were being paid by until or after the date when the country started production, and they could actually like pay it back. For that, of course, it was really like big offer, great deal. But on the other hand, those countries were obliged to open their economy for American investments. On one hand, of course, like French were not very happy about the McDonald's in France, but on the other hand, American investors helped them to rebuild the economy, and soon after, when they could, they pay them that back. So Americans were just another concurrence in here. Actually, they helped to build this like free market economy in here. So for that reason, Western countries in 1950s were quickly restoring their economy, and in 1960s they're actually far behind socialist countries, including us. Poland and Czechoslovakia were offered as two only socialist countries to also take loans from John Marshall Plan, but Stalin forced them to refuse it, and on the other hand they offered them cooperation and help from socialist countries with Comecon. We'll speak about this. That was one thing, and because it was refused by countries deliberated by Soviets, despite it was really great deal for them, that started to show also the other thing after this Iron Curtain speech of Winston Churchill. So they realized that probably those countries are ruled by Soviets, and despite like Czechoslovakia didn't seem to, but they were under a strong influence of them. Since they, as I told you, in Greece, in Czechoslovakia, they seized power despite there were these wars in terms of communists, they seized power. So Harry Truman, American president, issued a doctrine that was kind of the way how foreign policy of USA should behave. Every country must have it, like who are our friends and foes, and who are how should we tolerate like evil aggression, should we use military or not, intervention, and so on. So for that reason, Harry Truman soon realized that USA need to stop socialism, because socialism was spreading like very quickly after the war. But even after the war, there were many countries in which socialism prevailed, and that was Vietnam, that was Korea, that was China, that was Czechoslovakia. And it was kind of like domino effect. You know this domino effect. You have one figure, when you when you push it, so it's like all the line of these figures are falling down. So they needed to stop it. So for that reason, Harry Truman proclaimed that the Americans have right to support any anti-communist attempts all around the world in order to stop socialist revolution from the point of view of Soviet Union. Actually, if you remember, worldwide revolution was one of the ideas of Marxism-Leninism. So despite they could like proclaim we are peaceful countries. You know, I was living, being raised up in the times where Soviets were being supposed to be like peaceful country, but at the time they were fighting in Afghanistan. So that was not so easy to understand. And of course, on that way, USA tried to stop them. Of course, on the other hand, USA very often supported regimes that were nationalistic, that were totalitarian, that were racist, for example, and actually prevented many of like national deliberation movement in the third world. I explain what does it mean soon. So that was interesting. This Truman's doctrine had opposition in Soviet Union later. That was called the Brezhnev doctrine, but it came to be like in 1960s. And again, like Americans have right from themselves, from their point of view, to stop any anti-communist, to stop any communist movement. So the Soviets are obliged to help any communist movement in the world, which means invasion to Czechoslovakia, which means financial support of communist parties in, I don't know, Italy or Germany, but even support, secret before them, terrorist organizations against Israel, for example, or against United Kingdom. So as you see, there were many things like this. So what forms were there in the Cold War, and also what this Red Square military procession depicts. Actually, Cold War had a couple of forms. First, there was so-called arms race, čiže preteky zbrojení. Especially in nuclear arms race. When you open Wikipedia, just Google this term, you will see that during the history they had like 50,000 of missiles with nuclear weapons, and deployed them in many countries all around the world. And in this way, they tried to prevent, in case of war, they would just hit their enemy. Not only nuclear weapons, but even their allies had to build like huge armies. In NATO, that was not as big as in Warsaw Pact. And for example, Czechoslovakia had 500,000 soldiers and about 500 military jets and like 5,000 tanks, which is incredible amount of army, like United Kingdom, for example. So that was one thing. Of course, I don't need to explain that that was kind of economy war in this case. And in 1980s, the East Bloc really could not support, could not produce them anymore. Slovakia, especially, was kind of factory of these tanks and weapons, and that's why we had also big problems in economy. We need to restructuralize it in 1990s because nobody wanted to buy Soviet tanks made in Czechoslovakia or Slovakia. You know, there was no any need for that. Okay, what else? Of course, on the other hand, it promoted huge technological advance. I am a big fan of airplanes, of aircrafts, and I can tell you that between 1950s and 1970s, there was huge progress. And airplanes that Americans or Russians are using today have their projects in late 1970s and 1980s. And for other 40 years, there was not such like really important progress made apart from some IT information technologies being installed in airplanes, in aircraft, but the this design and the technology just didn't change at all. The other was James Bond. James Bond was actually, that uh, it's fictional character of the books and later also of the movies, but it was inspired by a couple of guys. Spies had been there all the history of military, but during this period it became even more important when in order to seize information about construction of nuclear weapon, about construction of new aircrafts, about submarines, about battle plans. I have to look for that, but there is a battle plan of Czechoslovak People's Army in case of this nuclear war of Third World War, like what countries Czechoslovakia shall invade. I will show you on this map. Czechoslovakia, in case of war, of course, there would be like nuclear weapons dropped, and then Czechoslovak People's Army, because each army of the Warsaw Pact had to attack some part of Western Europe, and Czechoslovakia had to occupy Austria, Switzerland, Bavaria, so southern Germany, northern Italy, and southern France. So that would be occupational zone of Czechoslovakia. Imagine these beautiful countries with all the Alpine region. I really don't know how we could be possible to fight there, but that was they actually estimated that expected that that would be just occupation of the country destroyed by these nuclear ashes. Okay, spy war for that reason was really a big hunt. Sometimes in some movies you can see it, and it was really like some of the agents had to like fight and run, and there were a lot of assassinations. And the most common were meetings in Vienna because Austria was neutral country. It was actually open country, open city, so nobody cared when Soviets or American ambassadors, diplomats, engineers came, but all of them were like guys with these machines, devices, gadgets for recording and assassinating. Actually, very famous spies, apart from Soviets and Germans and of course Americans. On both sides, actually, there were also Americans who were persuaded communists, so they joined CIA, and they actually were bringing like information to KGB, and uh, the best guy, the most infamous guys were agents of Israeli agency Mossad and of Bulgarian secret agency. That these guys are really assassins, like they had like poison tips of in umbrellas hidden and so on. So many of the things that you probably seen in James Bond movies are not so like crazy. Of course, many of them are, but that was the thing. So kind of information war. The other very important part were proxy wars. I will mention many of them because proxy wars po slovenských nazývame, ako ich nazývame? Také zástupné vojny, náhradné vojny. Imagine conflict somewhere in Africa, okay? There is like South Africa, South African Union fighting against Angola. English speaking or Dutch speaking country against and racist country against brand new country of with Portuguese language and many black African groups. Angolians are offered Soviet Union some military jets, MiG-29s, for example. They are offering Czechoslovak physicians, doctors. They are offering to build hospitals like China today. Of course, they want to stop it. I mean, Americans want to stop it according to using Truman Doctrine. So they offered South African Union to buy them oil or give them oil for free for the military jets to hit Angola, for example. And in this way, both countries had their allies, and actually supporting enemy's enemy is the thing that how you can do it. It's not about only these proxy wars that were many in Vietnam, in Korea, in Afghanistan. They didn't mind. None of the sides minded like whether these guys are good or bad. They just supported the enemy's enemy, and it could be from these racist regimes to radical communists killing people, or to terrorist groups, for example, on both sides. So that is the reason that, for example, Augusto Pinochet's regime in Chile was killing thousands of people, and Margaret Thatcher from UK, they supported them. They support it's cool because they do reforms and they stop communists. And this is also the reason why Spain and Portugal, still being fascist countries because they're neutral, but because they didn't join Second World War, they actually like accepted, tolerated secret allies. In case of war, fascist Spain and Portugal would join NATO, of course. Okay, what else? Of course, there was a lot of propaganda. I can tell you a lot of the many things in America with red heat, for example. I can give from my own experience that really Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia were peaceful countries, and we were helping little kids, poor kids in Vietnam, and Americans were evil, and Germans were evil, and so on. Of course, they use also economical embargoes, rarely also military embargoes, like in case of Cuban Missile Crisis. They actually competed in many things from design, from cars production to sports, and that was really big thing. Probably didn't have chance. For ancient Greek assignments for second graders, they have one interesting task to pick up 10 Olympic Games from the history that they found interesting. And many of them picked up Olympic Games like in Moscow, in Los Angeles in 1980s, or in München, Germany in 1972, because all of them were influenced by the Cold War. When some of the countries didn't participate because they protested against Soviet invasion to Afghanistan and so on. And for example, Bulgarian or Soviet sportsmen or DDR sportsmen, I mean Eastern Germany sportsmen, actually use doping only to defeat their rivals from capitalistic countries. So it was actually a whole machinery. So don't be surprised when Russia today, Russian Federation, I'm sorry to say that, but it's true that many of them did took doping that was actually offered by official structures of sport organizations, organized and ruled by state, controlled by state. So this is some kind of like remain of the Cold War. And support of enemies, I told you all about this stuff. So let's move on to the next slide because we need to proceed a bit. Okay, one of symbols of the Cold War was the Berlin Wall. Probably you know these stories how the capital of Germany was divided in two parts and separated like a big wall, and many people, Berliners, tried to cross it to escape to West Berlin. Many of them were killed or tried to dig tunnels under it. How did it came to be and how did Germany divide itself? We generally call it two Berlin crises. First crisis with I, crisis in plural is with E. So first crisis emerged in 1948-49, and the reason was that Germany was divided into occupational zones of the victorious countries in Second World War. So just like you see that these three or four parts, one was Soviet sector, the other British, French, and American Bavaria. The same was also in Austria and capital Vienna. Also, the capital of Germany, Berlin, was divided in three: French, British, American, and of course, Soviet sector, that was East Berlin. Now, they had to rule it together. For a couple of years, there was not such a big deal, but when the time was coming to organize free elections, because that was one of the results of the Potsdam Conference, so Soviets obviously start to manipulate, with things. Suddenly, some of the candidates disappeared. Probably Soviet gulags, we don't know. Communists suddenly had like a surprisingly high support in many of the country parts of East Germany, and it was really suspicious. So when also Americans, British asked that there should be some guys who should like follow these processes, Soviets refused that. They said no, we don't need it. Like, you do want to influence elections? No, you want to influence elections. So that was the thing that actually Soviets just disagree with accepting democratic norms on free elections. For that reason, no support that these free elections were not free in East Germany, and Communist Party or Social Democrats actually prevailed in many parts of East Germany, which of course those results didn't want to be accepted once. At least in West Germany, of course, many other parties, like Christian Democratic Party, Social Democratic Party, and so on, many others like Liberal Party. But Soviets didn't want to accept the results in the Western sectors. They said that they oppress communists, and of course, Western countries didn't want to accept manipulated communist victories. So both of these sectors actually allowed Germans, those elected Germans, from one faked, like manipulate elections, fraud elections, to build up their economy. One of the first things for rebuildment is the reinstallment of the currency of money. And for that reason, in East sector, these communists decided that they are going to use Deutsche Mark as before, because that was common currency in Germany, but it will not be bounded to golden standard, that is common, like a thing that sets the value of currency in economy, or on American dollar, which is like common thing even today, but on Soviet ruble. So surprisingly, they actually oriented on a central planned, economically restricted currency. That was nothing else, only accepting dominance of Soviets in here. So for that reason, despite Western countries widely criticize it, but Soviets allowed East Germans to install and introduce these German marks in here. Of course, in the West, they refuse it, and all these union parts, because now it's Bundesrepublik Deutschland, it means Union Republic of Deutschland. So each union state, Brandenburg and Bavaria and Mecklenburg, had to accept it. So they accepted that they are not going to use this Deutsche Mark, they are going to use bonds, and they elected that they should have their own capital called Bonn, and they will probably install their own currency, which means they start to organize different economy that does different state organization, which led very quickly that Soviets start to, of course, support this Deutsche Mark, and obviously there was installment of Soviet power in East Germany. So very quickly, West sectors decided to ask for help. These Western countries who were occupying, they supported them. For them, that was ideas of new Europe, where Germans will be allies with French and British and this European Union actually. So they supported these attempts, and proclamation of West German sectors into so-called FRD, Bundesrepublik Deutschland, so BRD, that became like Democratic West Germany, dnes to nazýva Spolková republika Nemecko, and quickly soon after, Soviets allowed these German communists to proclaim East Germany, or DRG, or generally called again German abbreviation DDR, Deutsche Demokratische Republik. Again, you see that one of the signs of communist countries or socialist countries was to give them nice democratic names: People's Republic, People's Democratic Republic, or just Democratic Republic of Germany. So their vision of democracy, of this Lenin, was completely different from democracy accepted in the West, of course. That was first, and actually first Berlin crisis, and actually the division of Germany, which caused many things. West Germany soon joined NATO in 1955, which led Soviets in creation the Warsaw Pact military organization as the opposition to NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which actually was established by Americans and Western European countries in order to defend against Soviets, who just at that year in 1949 constructed atomic bomb in 1949. For one decade, it was okay despite there were many things. But what East Germany had a big problem, that obviously the Soviet forms of rule were not accepted very well. So people tried to escape to West Germany. So soon after, Soviets built this Iron Curtain. So that was a big fence, big wall with military posts, and it was very difficult to cross it. So this Iron Curtain really erected on in the borders between the East and West. The same part of the border was in Czechoslovakia, between Germany and Austria, between Hungary and Austria, a small part in Slovenia to Austria and Italy. And what happens? So, but still, you have one place that East Germans could escape, and that was this West Berlin sector, because it was still free occupational zone, and this West Berlin was just easy. You just entered the town, got a plane, and fly, and got a flight to west, to the west. So for that reason, in 1961, Soviets tried to force Americans to accept that Berlin would be generally whole city accepted, swallowed by East Germany, which they didn't want to accept, and which led to a couple of economical and transport blockade. During couple of months, Soviet army just blocked any access to the West Berlin when they besieged it with soldiers, with German police, and start to build kind of again a wall in here. That caused, of course, many people from East Berlin to run away, to escape. in here, but as it was protected by soldiers, it was impossible. It was danger that people, the West Berlinians, would like suffer hunger. So for that reason, Americans built from their military basements. It's logical that the Americans had military basements since 1945 in Germany with millions of soldiers, and they built so-called aircraft bridge, čiže vzdušný most, in which airplanes, American civil airplanes, were flying about East Germany and dropping supplies of food and chocolate and chewing gum to make children safe and feel happy for a couple of months. And thanks to this resistance and air bridge, Soviets realized that probably West Berlin would be like not in their hands. So during one night around West Berlin, they built this Berlin Wall that was kind of iron curtain just inside in here. Oh, when I was a little kid, I was reading about this West Berlin in one encyclopedia for kids about geography. I was really surprised. How is it possible that there is like one city, West Berlin, super high, expensive and rich part, this special status, and the guys were writing not very positive things about it because it sounded cool, but it was not. So now West Berlin remained in here and only airplanes in here. Of course, they were not being shut down because otherwise Americans would strike. So that would have stricken. So that was a bit different. Okay, in this way, Berlin was divided, Berlin Wall 2, and soon after, American President John Fitzgerald Kennedy visited West Berlin. Only the visit of it showed that American president came to that place, so probably it will be like part of the under their protection. And he also said, "Ich bin ein Berliner." Ich bin ein Berliner, which means I'm the Berliner. I have to show you what Berlin actually is in German. I believe I will show you. Yeah, these are Berliners. Či pampuchy alebo šišky, ako ich my nazývame. So these are Berliners, like donuts, and Americans love them so much that they brought them to USA, and Homer Simpson adored it. Okay, sorry for that, guys. I had a phone call from Museum of Slave National Uprising, so but I will see what's going to be. When I interrupted my lesson, okay, I'm in mid-time. I'm in the mid-time, so let's move on. Ich bin ein Berliner, so maybe I should add some cartoon in here. Okay, so let's move on. I mentioned a couple of times that during this Cold War, these countries created a couple of alliances, and maybe I wanted to show you. Yeah, that's a fine thing, and it will be very helpful for you now to listen because you are obliged to draw this Venn diagram of this organization, their members. I can tell you that if you are going to copy the diagram from previous year, it will be wrong. So I cross it out, -5 or -10% down. For what reason? Because it is pretty difficult, and you have to think of about it. And probably it will be nice to set, I don't know, some figures or some papers with countries' names, and try to create these circles and množiny. I didn't have mathematics and English. I really miss it. So, how to make like things that, for example, Norway. Norway was the member of NATO, but not the member of European Union. Denmark is member of NATO and European Union, but not of the not of Eurozone today. So this is really interesting because, for example, Finland and Sweden are both members of European Union, but not of NATO. Yugoslavia was socialist country, but really bad relationship with the Soviet Union, and they were not members of the Warsaw Pact, but they were members of Comecon. So it's real difficult. So what I wanted to show you, be sure that you know these even in Slovak language, because probably you may use it, you may meet with this, and it's good to know it. So these alliances were either military or economical. So economical were the first of these were based upon the Marshall Plan, because Marshall Plan actually put these countries together, but this was not official and not like long stable, long surviving organization. So the first one when two countries, Poland and Czechoslovakia. So this actually are still borders, pre-war borders. I should change it. So they refuse it. They had to refuse it, but they didn't. They were not very happy about refusing this offer of loans, very good loans. So Stalin established this Comecon, which means Council of Mutual Economic Assistance. Po slovensky Rada vzájomnej hospodárskej pomoci, RVHP. Keď budete robiť rozhovory s vašimi rodičmi, starými rodičmi a budete o týchto veciach hovoriť, tak RVHP oni na 100% budú poznať a možno to budú používať. Takže buďte si, poznajte to prosím. This Comecon organized countries of socialist Eastern Bloc, and they should be upon some mutual assistance in order that we have like a surplus of coal and we have good factories, but we lack, for example, raw materials, let's say bauxite and oil and iron. So Soviet Union provided them to us for free, and they estimated that we should produce like tanks and TV sets and give them some coal, for example, and so on. Hungary, they had surplus of bauxite, which is basic metal needed for aluminium production, and they actually exported to all Eastern Bloc, and also the paprikas and tomatoes. Bulgaria had only this and cucumbers, so that's why countries like East Germany, DDR, or Czechoslovakia and Poland, partially, so they produce weapons for them and machinery, engineering stuff. Soviet Union in this case wanted to be like the best guys. So despite they didn't have technologies, maybe they had experts. Still, they Russians have very good universities, but their development is not so great apart from military. Even military is not so great. Despite they want to promote themselves, they are super cool. But usually conflicts, so Russian weapons usually fail in when they are challenged by this American, for example, or Israeli stuff. The point is that Soviet Union started to produce like for electronics, for example. We had very famous video games in 1980s that this fairy tale cartoon about wolf and rabbit, and wolf is like catching eggs falling from like hands stalls, and the bad rabbit is just pulling the eggs down. So that was funny, but it was actually the ultimate thing that they were able to make. Like Czechoslovakia or DDR were able to make much better things, and considering TV phones to TV sets and radios, it was much better than Soviet production. So some stuff was great, some was really bad, but the point was that that it was not based upon free market, but upon like central planned economy. And Czechoslovakia, because of the industry of our industry, were obliged to produce almost all the tanks or training military jets. And it was actually useless for us. Of course, it gave us like advantage in kind of like pride that we are like military production country, but that's why actually Dubnica, Krupina, Detva, Považská Bystrica, Martin. So they're all the places where BVPs were built, or tanks and so on. Okay, in the same year, in 1949, NATO was organized. North Atlantic Treaty Organization was military organization that put together America, Canada, and West European countries, apart from some neutral, just like Switzerland, Austria, Sweden, and Finland, and Ireland. And but all the others, even later Spain and Portugal, joined them, and including Greece. And a big surprise for many people, even Turkey, that decided to be like probably they would be endangered by Soviets, so they proclaimed like Communist Party illegal, and they allow Americans to install nuclear weapons on their territory. And these American missiles are in Turkey until today. So this is interesting, and actually the conflicts between Greeks and Turks, as always during the history, caused that these two countries are not so. Mm, Despite they're members of NATO, it didn't like prevent them from fighting each other. What is the point of NATO? Very easy. It was built, it was established as a protection against nuclear attack from Soviet Union, because in that year, Soviet Union constructed and tried out successfully first nuclear missiles. So for them, for example, invasion to West Germany, or invasion to Norway, or to Greece, or to Turkey, may cause like, yeah, step by step, like Ukraine, like part of Georgia are being occupied by Russians today. So step by step they just move forward. That's why in like long term perspective, for 30, 50 years, probably membership in NATO is the only protection for us in case Russians one day change the government, or Putin and his descendants would still make Russia like nationalistic, imperialistic country that would claim all Slavic lands. Still propaganda. It's like about union of all the Slavs together. So in this case, invasion attack on one member means invasion on whole organization, and every member state is obliged to help them. Despite I tell you that we can decide, yeah, we don't have to send, but there are no restrictions, but we should help them somehow, at least not fight. So send them money and oil and medicals and so on. So this is actually one big important thing that made Soviets prevent from other further attacks and invasions in many other countries. Compared to NATO, there was also SEATO, a Southeastern Asian Treaty Organization that was established by Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, and South Korea, I believe. If I mention all, maybe Singapore is there. I'm not sure really about this. Actually, NATO was the only, not the only, but one of two organizations that survived the Cold War. I was really wondering in 1990s why Americans didn't want to dissolve it, or what I was talking about, like nice peaceful solution, because nobody expected they would going to fight again, only in Hollywood movies. But the thing was that I expected if I were Russian, I would actually join NATO. Then if you are together, you can argue only in the Security Council of NATO or in your own assembly, but not outside. But it didn't happen. And actually, Russians felt really humiliated. With drunk President Boris Yeltsin, all the time their economy was collapsing despite of great resources, and NATO was still there. And not only the European Union, but even NATO was spreading further. And once Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania entered the Eurozone, even Bulgaria, Romania asked to European Union. They wanted to do that, so and Ukraine started to claim that they would like to enter European Union one day, even maybe NATO, or Georgia, Armenia too. So Russians started with restoring their power somehow, rearmament, and I would call it today second Cold War, unfortunately. And still NATO suddenly, after a couple of years, is reasonable again. Actually, it was really unpopular, especially after bombing Yugoslavia, Serbia, and Belgrade. We, generally Slovaks, even today, are against it, against Kosovo, for example, which result in NATO was not very successful. Still, we entered NATO anyway, because there are not only Americans or aggressive countries, but there is also Norway, Denmark, Iceland, countries like Portugal or Greece, or Benelux countries, Netherlands, Belgium. So it's not only big guys, but it's about stability. That even in long term, in half century, probably we will have big organization that can protect us from the others. It's not very nice for Russians, but it's true. Sad but true. Song by Metallica from 1991, 30 years old already, so that's interesting. Okay. West had also their economical organization, and that's famous European Union. This is how it is called today. Actually, at the beginning, there was this division of John Marshall Plan, and dividing this UNRWA, UNRWA supplies, and they realized that they actually, pardon, actually they had to share it among all the states, and this cooperation was much better than competing. And that was a moment when one guy, Robert Schuman, this one, maybe this is actually for seminar, but I can read you some parts of it. You know what? I'm going to read it for you. Okay, so the excerpt from Schuman Declaration. Robert Schuman, May 1950s, proclaimed in establishing one interesting organization. In taking upon herself for more than 20 years the role of champion of United Europe, France, because he was French minister, has always had as her essential aim the service of peace. Okay, maybe propaganda. A united Europe was not achieved, and we had war. That was probably about this interwar period, League of Nations. Europe will not be made all at once or according to a single plan. It will be built through concrete achievements which first create de facto solidarity. It means helping each other when you need it. The coming together of the nations of Europe requires the elimination of age-old opposition of France and Germany. Three major wars since 1870s, 1910s, and 1930s, 40s was between France and Germany. Any action taken must in the first place concern these two countries, because they are the biggest. It proposes that Franco-German production of coal and steel, blah blah blah. What does it mean? Both of the countries, even Adolf Hitler, and in each war they were fighting for the region of Alsace-Lorraine in French part and Rar-sur-Len from the other side of the River Rhine. Along the River Rhine, you have one of the largest supplies of coal in Europe. Because you have coal mines there, you can build steelwork factories and you can produce military vehicles, railways, anything. That's why this region is like steel heart of Germany and steel heart and coal heart of France. But for that region, who holds it, he holds like the power about Western Europe. For that reason, Robert Schuman had an idea that what if we erase border and we made one simple union of these steelworks and mines in one supranational corporation in which there would be free market, free flow of products and goods and even people mixing up and accepting democracy, accepting human rights, trying to find common history if there is not. So at least to try to understand and know, like they had common history books, French and German, and things they disagreed. So they just also mentioned how Germans look at it, both sides. So you could decide who was the bad or good guy. It was not so easy, and that made them actually suddenly like peaceful, ending like this hostility. It proposes, okay, so within the framework of an organization open to the participation of the other countries of Europe, soon they would be joined by Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Luxembourg, and so on. Even the United Kingdom, despite the United Kingdom uh, abolished the European Union once or twice, and this like second or third time. The pooling of coal and steel production should immediately provide for setting up of common foundations for economic development as a first step in the Federation of Europe. If people are rich, they don't mind having democracy. If they are not rich, if they suffer, they are looking for extreme solutions. All this experience we have from the 20th century is this, guys. If you suffer, you are willing to give up your rights. You need to have something. There probably cannot be political freedom without economical freedom. Right to earn money, to have some riches and wealth, because people are like this. Sad but true again. Still, and it will change the destinies of those regions which have long been devoted to the manufacture of munitions of war, of which they have been the most constant victims. So these regions, because of war, had been like the part of it, and solidarity is in the way they would help each other. That's why that was idea of Comecon, to help each other. In this way, we are going to help each other, but within free market. Okay, in case we need supplies like Greece 10 years ago, they needed help to save their currency, euro currency. So many countries gave them money, like lended them money. Slovakia refused because Richard Sulik refused that. And our government of Iveta Radičova fell down. But Greece was helped, was given loans, and it helped them. They had to completely change their economy, but it helped them. That was solidarity. And now this is probably not better example as this COVID, because I can tell you, if we were not in European Union, we wouldn't have not this like AstraZeneca, bad Astra. I got AstraZeneca vaccine, but neither Pfizer, neither Johnson and Johnson and other, because European Union buys them all and just distributes them in all European countries, and not according to the size. Actually, per capita, we were given one of the highest number of vaccines. You know why? Because they feel solidarity. This European Union, even like poor members, small members can be helped when they need it. But then we should help them too in case of economy. Okay, so what I wanted to say that at the beginning in 1952, there was so-called European Community for Coal and Steel was established, in which France and Germany established a common economical alliance concerning coal and steel. Soon it was joined by Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and later Italy, and they created with so-called the Treaties of Rome. Rímske zmluvy. In 1957, they created so-called European Economic Community. So 5 years later, after the Steel and Coal Union, they established kind of big economic federation of Western European countries. That was called EEC. My to po slovensky nazývame doslova že Európske hospodárske spoločenstvo alebo EHS. A toto je priamy predchodca Európskej únie. So what happened? Now this was really efficient. So during in 1960s, they evolved a couple of more goals. To join, for example, these countries, they have different economical stuff. So to make similar taxation, similar economy, they realized that in Italy there is high corruption. So they needed to change also jurisdiction. That would be unified jurisdiction that would be free and fair. Then they realized that in the United Kingdom or in France, let's say rights of Algerians or Pakistani people are being broken very often, which Belgians or for example Danes didn't like at all. So they had to change also their constitutions in order of protection of individual even more. So this was for not only political rights but even like democratic and individual human rights. And hand in hand with economical union and freedom, there was political and individual freedom, human rights freedom. So this is actually basic idea of European Union, of AEHS or EEC in this case, that attracts people. Ukrainians would love to be the members of European Union and NATO today because on one hand, NATO would provide them with security and European Union with possibilities for development in case they would be in danger. European Union is willing to help them. This is incredible, but that's true. What Hitler actually managed to do from all his goals is that Germany became multicultural and very solid country with others and helping unification of Europe based upon multicultural, multi-ethnical peace and democratic form of government. So that is incredible. Probably Hitler would be rotating in his coffin if he had any. Okay, what's the point? One was actually freedom in this style. The one goal was pretty, I would call it anarchistic, which means erasing all the borders because borders are obstacle in a free trade. If you can freely travel to Spain, to France, why not? Cigarettes are cheaper, cars are cheaper, why not? Don't pay toll, erase the toll. And even the last obstacle would be different currencies. So many people just speculated with Italian liras, with French francs, and Deutsche Marks, and British pounds. So creating one single currency in Europe would be perfect. Actually, many people suppose it as a dream, but it came true in 2002, 2001. There was so-called Eurozone, which allowed this to happen. Also, with no borders in Europe, it happened with establishment of the Schengen zone within the European Union. And you can freely travel from Slovakia to Portugal. Nobody would ask you for the passport. It's only ID enough for you in case somebody would stop you. This is incredible for many people, many countries. You don't know how lucky you are that many people from Moldova or I don't know from Syria cannot travel anywhere. So this was really great thing. Erasing borders and having one single kind of democratic and human rights standards and judicial standards would make these countries free, safe, attractive, and that's happy, and stable and developing. That's why in 1992, when they managed to have like these new three goals, they decided to change the name to European Union. Also, there were times when Portugal and Spain joined them. Later, Austria joined European Union, despite being neutral country. Sweden, Finland joined them because they see it as a positive thing. NATO for them was kind of provocation against Russians, against Soviet Union. So that's why this idea was nice. Why didn't Norway or Norway, for example, or Switzerland didn't join European Union is the reason that both of the countries are very rich, and they found it like ineffective to support the other countries when they have surplus of everything. But interesting is that they really enjoy this Schengen system of free borders, of no borders at all. So they asked European Union to have like exception, like permit to use also this Schengen free zone. And European Union said, okay, but you need to pay us to have some support, And since the time, actually, Norwegian royal funds are supporting extremely lot of projects all around Europe, including Calvary Fund today, mostly in countries with authoritarian regimes like in Russia and so on. Swiss, for example, they are not member of European Union, but they pay one of the highest fee to European Union freely, only to use it. So you see this kind of collaboration that is useful for them. Britain is the only one always with the different political perspectives and so on. So this is another story. Okay, European Union does, and 2004 important for us because they decided to accept even Slovakia soon, only several years after the fall of Vladimir Mečiar. I didn't believe. I believe when I estimated when can we join European Union in case everything would be fine, like in the year 2020, 2020, and we entered like in 2004, which for me was incredible, offer willingness of Western European countries to be the part of Europe, and it really saved our asses. Sorry for that. Okay, still, when we go chronologically, that was not the last one. Still, we need a military pact for Eastern Europe, and that happened when West Germany decided to join NATO. Propaganda of Soviets was claiming that as you see, these capitalistic imperialists are offering Nazi fascists to enter their structures. Actually, it's true that many former Nazi experts were part of their development of A-bombs, for example, or many of them were in CIA. But the same thing happened in immigrants from Eastern Europe that they joined CIA or Radio Free Europe. So propaganda was working. Still, anyway, Soviets decided to react with creation, just like NATO, also their own military pact, military union alliance that was also had like attack on one member means attack on everybody else, and they call it the Warsaw Pact. Try to guess where the treaty was signed up. Yeah, it was not in Warsaw, it was in Prague. In Prague, but in Warsaw, there had been meetings where they decided to have this pact, and then they signed it up in Prague. The Warsaw Pact had only like common trainings, common military, I'd say trainings, like given today Russia had or NATO in the Baltic lands, kind of like proclamative that we are so strong, so great. And the only action that Warsaw Pact really deployed was the occupation invasion of Czechoslovakia of 1969. Experts of NATO were surprised how fast and with a large scale these communist countries were able to invade Czechoslovakia, how fast it was, and how secret and no spies expected it. They had like some claims that something may happen, but not this and not so fast. That was the only military act of the Warsaw Pact. NATO had many of them, especially in the 1990s. Not all, apart from the last ones in Iraq, so they were approved by Security Council of United Nations. Okay, of course, United Nations different organization like worldwide, but you have these two poles: blue, west; red, east; good, evil. It depends on your perspective where you sit. And there are many countries who are not among them. What about like Finland? What about Austria, Switzerland, Ireland, Sweden? What about Yugoslavia? Like bad guys of Soviet Union, because in the Warsaw Pact, Yugoslavia didn't enter them because like several years ago they had a split argument with Stalin. They never joined it. Albania, when the Warsaw Pact invaded Czechoslovakia, Albania claimed that they refused it and they just dismembered from the Warsaw Pact, and nobody could force them to do that. Romania, member of the Warsaw Pact, refused to participate on this invasion and claimed that if Czechoslovak People's Army will be given command from the president of Czechoslovakia, Ludvík Svoboda, to fight, and Czechoslovakia start to fight, start to defend. Romania will invade, try to guess who? Of course, Hungary, as always. But they didn't. We didn't fight. They didn't fight. So this is interesting thing. Even in NATO, there are very different things that USA in 1950s of Dwight Eisenhower was really paranoid, anti-leftist, anti everything. But then when other presidents came, it was really different. Some of Republican presidents were really open-minded to China, for example, to support them to be the rival of Soviet Union. Jimmy Carter, he was like open-minded with peace solution. It didn't help actually. Soviets were more motivated. Ronald Reagan came like a hawk of Republican Party, started with embargoes and actually helped to defeat Soviet Union in economical way. So this is really difficult to claim like who is the bad guy, good guy in this conflict, and probably human rights are the thing that you have to respect, and that's why NATO was not always the good guy all the time. That's why many countries in the world decided to be non-part of this bipolarny side of bipolar world of the second of good and bad guys, and they decided to establish so-called non-aligned movement, alebo sorry for that, hnutie nezúčastnení. Members were neutral states from all over the world, countries that were like peaceful, like India, Brazil, countries that were a bit authoritarian, but they didn't want to like be part of this war, like Syria, for example, and many Arabic countries. Sorry for that. I need to check the time because my cough indicates I should stop. Yeah, I should end up, guys. So we are moving on next lesson on the Cold War of the Proxy Wars. So I will see how I end it up. So that's all from me from the first part about the Cold War. And have a nice day. Stay negative in tests and positive in mind, as always. Bye bye.